Welcome to Sunday Springboard with Melanie and Kimberlyn Coaching, where we help women recover from and flourish after stress and trauma. Have you ever heard people talk about a situation where they're obviously being treated badly and they just like, oh, I just have to accept this? And you're thinking, no, don't accept it. Get out, run away, run fast, run far. Or you've heard other people talking about a situation where they just cannot accept it. And you want to just say, come on, you can't change it, move on. Or maybe you yourself have been in either one of these situations. Maybe you have been accepting something that everyone else is telling you shouldn't be accepting this, get out. Or you're feeling like, I know I should move on, but I'm just having problems. So we've been talking about stress and how to reduce our stress, and obviously having those kind of feelings contribute to our stress. Hang on a minute, let me share my screen with you. Oh, did we get it? There we go. Okay, great. So as always, I want to remind you what we're talking about. To relieve stress, first of all, we got to know how to relieve it in the moment. When we get triggered, when we get stressed, how do we regulate our bodies? Normally, breathing is a great way. All kind of activity with the body, interaction with friends. There are many kind of ways. If you've missed the previous videos, go back to Sunday Springboard on my KimberlynCoaching.com website, and you can watch all the previous videos. So we also talked about eliminating the situations when they are stressful, when we can. Sometimes stress can be good, sometimes it is not. And then decreasing our reaction to stress. We know it's not always, and not even mostly, the actual situation that is causing us to be stressed out, but our reaction to that stress. We've talked about, we're starting to do the core disciplines. We've talked about awareness. So many times we're just running on habits that our brains have run on for so many years, we don't even realize that we're not making choices. Once we become aware of things, then we can learn, do we accept, do we make changes? Today, we're actually going to talk about radical acceptance and whether or not we should accept it, because sometimes we should not be accepting the situation. We should be making some changes. And sometimes we do need to accept because there is nothing left to change. We're going to talk about all of that in more detail today. So yeah, the third thing that we've been talking about for weeks is that the situations that we are in are not necessarily causing our stress. It's our reaction to the situations. So how can we change our reactions? And we've had weeks and weeks about all kind of different things about this. So we've started talking about the core disciplines, and these are concepts. When you use this in your life, they help you live more powerfully, have more energy, have more enjoyment, and for what we're talking about, you have less stress. We talked about being aware. So many times we're just running on the habits that we have created over the years, and we're not even aware of what we're doing, why we're doing it, what we're thinking. And we know that our thoughts create our feelings, create our behaviors, and create the results. So many times we might have results, but we have no clue why we got there. But when we go backwards and we become aware of what started it all, this can help us move on. And once we become aware, then we want to accept. We have been talking about acceptance for weeks. And the main thing I think for me that I always want to remember and to explain to people is to accept something does not mean that you approve of it, that you're okay with it. It means that you're accepting this is what is happening. This is reality. And then we work through and decide how acceptance can help us in this situation. So the aspect of acceptance we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about radical acceptance. It's basically what we've been talking about, but it's a little bit stronger, and it's definitely helpful for people who have chronic pain or situations they can't get out of. We're also going to talk about how do you know when to accept and when not to accept, because actually we should not accept every single thing in our life. Now, we have to do that initial bit of acceptance of, yes, this is happening. Yes, this is a situation. But then we don't necessarily accept the situation. We may make changes to move on or not. And so that's the last thing we'll talk about today. So radical acceptance, the definition is the ability to accept situations that are outside of your control without judging them. Now, this is kind of what we've been talking about all along, but this goes just a little bit stronger. We're not judging them. And when we are able to take a situation that seems bad, we don't judge it as bad, we just accept it. This helps reduce the actual suffering. Pain is not always an option, but suffering is an option. So some ideas about radical acceptance is, if we're able to do this, we are not attached to our painful past. Yes, this happened to me. Yes, I feel the pain. I felt the pain, but I can step back a little bit, detach from it, and not let it overwhelm me, not let it become my identity. This is something that happened to me, not who I am. And this non-attachment, this is the key to overcoming the suffering. So the pain might be there, but the suffering, you get to choose how long you want to actually suffer. Now, you can't just decide, I don't want to suffer anymore. You have to work at it. You have to take steps. Obviously, you know that I am always interested in working with and helping anyone who would feel like they needed a little bit of extra help on this. You can also get help. Remember, I talked with you on Friday about Celebrate Recovery. It's a wonderful support group to help you work through anything that you've been through. And friends and family and church, there's a lot of ways you can get help. But if you want help from me, I always put a link in the show notes. You can click the link and schedule a complimentary session, and we can talk and see if we think we can work well together. So when we're talking about radical acceptance, we're talking about detaching. This doesn't mean we're not feeling the emotions. We are feeling the emotions. We're just accepting those emotions. We're not fighting them. When we fight them, they stick around longer. When we accept them, we can move through them. So the whole idea of this is to not let the pain turn into the suffering. And we are the ones who get to choose that. Even if we can't choose whether to feel the pain or not, we can determine whether to allow that to move into suffering. I noticed that this week. As I worked through this, I thought I need to accept that this may be a long haul thing. I may deal with this for months. And at the time I was thinking about this, it had only been 3 days, and it already felt like it had been 3 months. And though it's minor, and I definitely don't want to compare it to some of the major things y'all are dealing with, it's still a distraction. It's still an irritation. It is still a little bit of pain in my life. Physical pain and emotional pain. I can't see very well. And I can see fine, but like I was at this convention and they had the words up on the screen. I couldn't read any of the screens. So while it's not debilitating, I can do my daily job. I can do my work. It makes it harder. And so I get to decide, am I going to be angry about this? Am I going to think, why did this have to happen to me? This is a terrible time. Why can't it be some other time? How long it's going to last? All of that would keep me in the suffering, keep me in the anger, keep me in the stress, and it would rile my body up. My brain would start pouring out those hormones and make everything worse. So if I can just accept and say, I don't like this. It's not what I planned. But I can use this. I can think of now there's people I can relate to, people who can't see well. I can relate to that now. People that have been through this, or people that are having some paralysis, minor, but I can relate a little better than I could before. So I'm trying to use this as a learning situation rather than a, how can I get out of this? I'm trying to say, what can I learn from this? And these are the kind of things that help us move past and not allow the pain to become suffering. So one of the ways that you do this is when you're starting to have these negative feelings, you're starting to feel like you're suffering. So you're watching, you're thinking, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And identify those. Once you identify it, then you can decide, where can I change my thinking? And that changing my thinking will change my feelings. And then you can make those changes so that you don't feel any worse than is necessary. So the important thing about radical acceptance is this lack of judgment. Now, again, this does not mean that we approve of it. It doesn't mean that we're okay with it or that we like it. It's just that we're not going around thinking of it as bad. We're just saying, this is what is. This is reality. Now, how can I deal with this in the best way possible? We're just not getting caught up in the emotional reaction. We might, it can happen to us. I'm not saying you're never going to have these bad feelings, but once we have them, we can work through them. We don't have to just live in them. Like a bird can drop on your head, but don't let him build a nest in your head, right? So we've talked about that there are some times to accept, there's sometimes not to accept. So let's talk about some situations that we should not accept. If you're in an abusive relationship, a physical relationship, physically abusive relationship, just you have to get safe. You have to move on quickly. If it is an emotionally abusive relationship, you may have some time. You can play with things and figure out how best to move on out of that relationship. But you should not accept being abused. If there's something dangerous going on in your work situation or in your home situation, anytime there's any kind of danger, this is not something to accept. This is something to figure out how to get out of this. But if you're being harassed at work, or you're being taken advantage of, you're not being paid a fair wage, you're being treated poorly, you're being disrespected in any situation of your life, these aren't things to accept. These are things, other than that first acceptance, right? Accepting this is real, this is really happening, this is truly abuse, this is truly harassment, this is truly disrespect. You may have to get to that point, but then you don't have to accept that situation. It's time to find out, what can I do to move on, move out of this abusive situation? So maybe you're experiencing burnout at work. You're not motivated. Your job is not motivating to you. It's not challenging to you. Do you just accept that? I mean, you may accept it for certain reasons, but in this whole scheme of being powerful and reducing stress, this is not a situation to accept. This is a situation to start researching, start deciding, how can I change? Can I change my job? Can I change my situation? Do I need to leave my job? What do I need to do? What changes can I make? So another time when it's not good to accept is if you have some degree of control over the situation. If there is something that you can do to change things and to move on, then this is a time to do something, not just to accept. If you could make some kind of a change that would improve your situation, this is not the time to accept. This is the time to make some decisions, make some goals, take some action. So here's some other more, not so concrete. So if the decision that you're making, the situation that you're staying in, that you're accepting, if you're intentionally not taking action because of fear, this is not a good thing. If you're using your acceptance as a crutch, so you don't have to face the situation, you don't have to make these decisions, this is not the time to accept. If you are people pleasing, you're worried about people being mad at you, worried about people approving of you, and you're not standing up for yourself, these are all times that acceptance is not appropriate. These are times when you need to look at the situation and decide, why am I not doing this? So women in abusive situations, they're often staying in that abusive situation out of fear. Fear of, can I take care of myself? Can I live without this man that I've been with for so long? They have their whole identity built up in being a wife. So and being married to that person, they're in that trauma bond, and they don't take the steps because they're fearful. Maybe you're fearful that you can't get another job if it's a job situation. You're fearful that you can't support yourself. You're fearful that people are going to be unhappy with you. So I've told y'all before, I was married to an alcoholic, and he was in prison for a while, came back, and I told him I can't do this again. And so in my heart, I knew that if I caught him drinking again, I was going to have to end my marriage. And I did not want that. I still loved him. I still believed in him. I still hoped for good things. So I allowed, for a couple of years, I allowed him to deceive me and make me believe that he wasn't drinking. It wasn't that I knew he wasn't, that I didn't think he was drinking. It's that I didn't want to face the situation, because if I admitted to myself, yes, he is doing this, then I knew I was going to have to take steps to change things that I wasn't ready to do yet. So I was accepting things that I should not have been accepting. And finally, there came a point that I said, this is enough, and I had to move on. And that was a happy day, actually. Well, it was sad, but it ended up happy. So when should we accept? So maybe you're going through a divorce or a breakup. Maybe they left you, or maybe you decided it's time, but you're still just not happy about it. You're having a hard time moving on. This is a time when acceptance is what you're going to work toward. It's a process, doesn't happen immediately, and you may need help, like I said, through all kind of support groups, or if you want to work with me, I would love to help you with that. What if you have an unexpected change in your life plans? Like we had that with COVID, right? All of a sudden, everything in our world changed. At first, I didn't accept. I was angry. I was frustrated. How long is this going to be? And we just knew, right, that everything was going to go back to normal in the fall, and it didn't. And finally, after a little bit, I thought, I am making myself crazy here. I need to accept this, or I am going to keep being unhappy. And of course, it went against everything that I've been living by and teaching. So I had to start changing and accepting this is what it is. How can I use this? How can I learn from this? How can I take advantage of this change in my life to bring good out of it? And I did. I actually spent time, I got to take more classes. I got to learn more things, and things that I couldn't have done if I'd been in my previous really busy life. So when things happen in your life that you have no control over, this is a time for acceptance. What if you have a loved one that just dies, after maybe it's unexpected, or maybe it's coming. Either way, this is a major change. You lose your job, other traumatic things, your house burns. Things happen in our lives that are traumatic, they're major, but we have no control over them. This is a time to work toward acceptance. What if you had a traumatic upbringing as a child? You had abuse, physically, mentally, emotionally, and you are having trouble moving through that. So of course you want to accept this did happen. I was treated this way. This did happen, but this is in the past. I cannot change this. It could also be things that you did in the past, things that you did that you feel guilt and shame about. But this happened in the past. You cannot change it. So you accept that it happened, and then work to accept that you can do nothing about it, but see where to go from here, how to learn, how to grow, and move forward. If we refuse to accept, this is what causes more pain. This is what causes the suffering, because when we refuse to accept it, our brains and our bodies still know it happened. They do not let us lie to ourselves for long. Our brain will keep pouring out those negative hormones. They will keep destroying us physically and emotionally. So when you refuse to accept, you're just bringing yourself more pain. And when you try to avoid negative emotions, you can't do that. You cannot pick and choose which emotions you won't feel. If you say, I don't want to feel pain, I don't want to feel grief, I don't want to feel sad, I don't want to feel fear, and you block it off, you also block off all your positive emotions. You block off your joy, your happiness, your enthusiasm. So you end up living this flat life with no emotions. Generally, the fear and the anger can kind of override even when you try not to let them. But the joyful emotions will get pushed down, and you won't be able to feel them. So you have to do either or. You either have to accept, I'm going to accept all emotions and feel them and move through them so that I can feel the good ones as well as the bad, or you decide I'm okay with closing it all off. And if you're having a hard time knowing what you're feeling, you can't articulate it, I don't have a word for this, we can help you with that. Once you can put a word to the feeling, the feeling loses a lot of its power, because it's like it's not that I'm sad, I'm depressed, but that I feel sadness, I feel depression, I feel anger. This is not your identity. This is a feeling that you're feeling, which is temporary and has no power and is neither good nor bad. It's just a feeling. So some more things to accept. When little things happen, they bring up your negative emotions, your anger. A lot of times we just want to ignore the little things because we think, everybody else is dealing with such bigger things. I shouldn't let this get to me. I should just, so we just ignore it. We don't accept it. We don't say this is what is. So one of the things that I do that helps me in this situation is I call it an imperfect list, like the word imperfect. As a perfectionist, when things don't go my way, I can just do tiny little mess ups that get to me, but I tend to say, oh, I shouldn't let that bother me. It's so little. But after a while, all these little things add up. And so it's time to do my list. And I write out my list of all the little things. I did this wrong, I did that wrong. And like I said, these are always minor, very, very small. But I make them all. I remember I've told you before that when it's in your head, it seems like a million things. But when you write it down, it never is. It's always finite. And so I make this list of all these little things. When I get to the end of it, I look at them and I'm aware these are all little things, and yet these caused emotions, but putting them down takes the power away. I admit that, yes, this made me feel this way, this made me feel that way. It's okay. I can feel it and I can move on. Very, very powerful. I've told you, journaling is a very powerful way to live a joyful life. So if you're stuck, you've got something negative, you can't move on. Again, writing is great. Working toward acceptance, working with someone. This is a time when acceptance is very appropriate and powerful. If you have people in your life telling you, hey, you need to just let go. It's time to move on. These are people that love you, people that are wise. They don't have a reason to tell you something different. Then listen to them and start thinking, maybe they're right. Maybe it is time. Sometimes we don't see the forest for the trees, and we do not see the bitterness and the anger that we are showing to other people. So if you've got other people telling you this, then it's time to look at it at least to see whether it's time to move into acceptance. So if you have a situation that has no solution, there's no way to improve it, nothing else has worked, you've tried everything, because we always want to try anything we can to move out of a situation that feels negative. But when you get to the point that there's nothing left to do, then this is a time when acceptance is very powerful. So let's kind of sum things up. Radical acceptance, yes or no? No, if a change or an action can make things different. No, if you're in a dead-end job that you hate. No, if you're stuck in a relationship, which especially if it's abusive. Yes, if it's past trauma. If you are feeling like to accept it means to approve it, remember that is not what it means, but this is a time that we say yes to radical acceptance. Anything from our past. And yes, if there's nothing left to do, we've done everything, there is no way to change this, and either we accept it or we suffer. This is the way to decide yes to acceptance. And I just want to end with this. I felt like that this lesson was a little bit of a downer, maybe. Felt like, you're suffering pain in this and just accept it. But I just want to tell you that acceptance is a very joy-filling decision. When you can accept life, you can live with power, you can live with excitement, enthusiasm, passion. You can move through life enjoying it. Acceptance causes a lot of joy and acceptance and joy and peace and reduction of stress, which remember is what we're talking about. So try it out. Acceptance is pretty amazing, and I hope you will have a very great week full of acceptance of the things that you should accept and action to change the things that you should not accept and wisdom to know the difference. Have a great week. Bye-bye.